but it is kind of, I think.
Well, I just learned anytime I get an email from Rance to do a project, I just say yes and just dive in, and it's gonna unfold into like some cool, amazing project. So like I always love getting like that kind of email from him. And this one with David attached to it, like how fascinating. I had met David before, and you know we've all seen him in a million of our favorite movies and TV shows over the years. And how cool to see like what he had poured so much passion into, and in the length that he had sent me, I also was able to see Kat's wonderful artwork. So there was so much to be like guided by and inspired by, and it was just great to like contribute and collaborate the best I could with that. And it just kind of, there was so much there that just like, you know, I didn't put that much. There was enough there that just kind of like inspired and guided, and it was just like a harmonious, you know, approach to it. And I love working like that. Just read everything, immerse into it, and then it just kind of reveals to you what it wants you to do with it.
If I can have my computer screen on the thing, I wanted to show you all some of the iconography that we've got in this. There's David.
There's some iconography on one side, not on the other side.
So there's an interesting thing in this, like Z2 usually does prints and stuff like that, but with this project, there was so much symbolism that was wedded into this. Like it was really important to David that there's so many Easter eggs, and there's so many things that if you go back and read the book a second time or a third time, it's going to reward those things because there's so many little seeds that are planted, both literally and figuratively. So you have things like bees, and you have things like the eye of a needle. So in our 3 prints, we have the 3 most important visual icons in there, but that's not enough, because then we have what we're calling focus cards. Originally we talked kind of about tarot and things like that, but one of the things that I'm going to let David talk about now is the idea that this can be a reciprocal experience for the reader, right? That it's not just a passive experience, that ideally, at its very least, this helps people who are feeling lost feel a little less lost and a little less alone, but it's also in the same way that this book has been part of David's healing process and growth process, that maybe this gives some tools for the reader also. So I wanted to ask David to talk a little bit about what the intention is with the focus cards.
I deeply wanted this book, this experience for the reader, to be a puzzle, to be a labyrinth that you could go into, get lost in, and you know, truly make all kinds of discoveries backwards, forward, sideways. And it was so lucky when Kat got on board and started crafting the visual world of the space, because there is so much detail in the world of Chicago alone before we even go through into this mysterious other world that's been created for our hero character, and why it's been created. And was it created for her? Was it created against her? Was it created to liberate her? Was it created to trap her? What are those spaces inside of ourselves that we've created and been creating since we were probably very small children, maybe even before we were born, who knows? But I think that what's so weird to me is that, you know, knowing that I needed to tell this story, that I always felt this very, very strong compulsion and desire to tell this tale, because it's a mystery story, and on the surface, it's a story about a young woman who makes a very odd choice, which leads to her almost losing her life, and her life is saved by someone who she's never met before, has no clue who this person is, and this person, she's told, has maps and pages and papers all connected to her daily life, her routines, what she does, where she goes. And that sends her down, if you will, a metaphorical rabbit hole of like, who the fuck is this? I'm gonna put on my investigator hat and I need to figure out what this person is and what they mean to my life and why. All of this leads to this place that she discovers. On there, she finds she finds something in this man's apartment, which are these microscopic sculptures that he's crafted within the eyes of the needle. And as fantastical as that is, that's just an invitation into a whole other place. I built and built and built up the mythology and the worlds and the thoughts of this, and a lot of stuff symbolically, like the bees, which, in defense of themselves, puncture the skin and can cause wounds to us, which can have all kinds of reactions, but would also create stuff that keeps life moving on Earth, and which are so vital to everything from agriculture to air, as well as tunnels, as well as locks and keys and notes and perfection and places we keep our secrets. I never knew why I needed to write this story, and I had that meeting with Rance in the fall of 2023, winter of 2023, which then led into 2024, where I was actually like scripting the book, which got to be much longer than originally I had pitched him, and thankfully him and Josh were so supportive because it just kept growing and growing and growing. I was like, I'm sorry. But I was writing this script literally as one of the most vital, powerful, strongest foundations of my personal life was crumbling around me. And I had found myself for the first time at 49 years of age or 48 years of age, completely isolated from my family and the people that I love the most, and living in a remote city, and completely isolating myself from them through my own behavior and exhibition of stuff that reflected deeply broken and unwell parts of myself that still required and needed so much healing and recovery and work. And I never had realized in the 22 at that point, 21 and a half years since I had stopped utilizing the power of opiates to escape feeling the way that I didn't want to feel, that although I removed that from the equation, I had turned to a dependency and an addiction on control, and a compulsive controlling disorder, which caused me to not only inundate, but deeply, wound and harm the relationships that mattered the most to me, because I was so afraid of being left alone that what I would do is I would sink my vampire claws into you and keep you as close as possible to me in a way that was its own form of addiction. And realizing that was the cause of pushing the people and the things that I love the most actually away from me, left me in the darkest hole of despair I'd ever found myself. And I turned quite desperately, deeply back into not only the tenets of the 12 steps of the recovery program, but also into all forms of therapy, which really illuminated me in the fact that there was experiences in my own childhood that had initiated behavioral patterns in me that had caused me to embrace behaviors that felt so like they were going to be swords to help me feel safe in this world, and they were having the opposite effect of that. One module of therapy in particular called IFS, which stands for internal family systems, all the different parts of ourselves that evolve and grow over time, often trying to just keep us feeling safe, but can usually cause a lot of problems for us. And I'm writing this fucking book about this woman who's crafted all of these ways of trying to control and manipulate the world around her so that she can feel safe. And ultimately what's inside is somebody that's terrified and deeply wounded, as we all are. I don't think there's a single person that doesn't carry with them, at least in some degree, some of that abject terror we had when I don't know what happened to you. I know what happened to me, and I know what happens to Alex in this, but I know that it's something that is much more common and threads us together more than definitely keeps us apart. And I would touch base with Rance, who was giving me these incredible fucking notes on my script and helping me with all the symbology and the stuff that I didn't even know why I had put in there. and his attention to detail was so beautiful, and it made me feel so loved, as the relationship between writer and editor can often just be checking for typos and shit. No, Rance was like in there, deep in the shit with me, and when we came through, and the book was ready to be, there was so many symbols, and when you find the book, and however it finds its way into your life, one of the wonderful things with this particular edition are these cards. These cards that I think would be so cool, because if you look at the characters or the different motifs throughout the story that can represent different things. For example, our hero, Alex, I came up with basically 7 different, Rance did really. He was like, here's 7 symbols throughout this text that I think are very meaningful. And if you have a prompt that could go with each one, I think that could be really meaningful to people, either while they're reading, after they read it, just to pick one up whenever you want to read. And it's an eye, an ear, a knife, a finger, a key, a small hand, and a cross. And just for one example, our hero, Alex, is the hermit, and I think of her in this term. This is one example of what one of the cards would say. It would say, the safest place you ever found was buried deep in the basement, away from the world, and protected you from feeling the way you felt at that time in your past, that unforgettably painful time. And yet, the safety you feel here is a confining illusion. There is a key, so if you see the key symbols, there is a key to the door at the top of the stairs, which leads to freedom from this place and infinite possibility. Find the key. It's closer than you think. So I hope as people experience this book and all that comes with it, they will find hopefully some reflection of some of those things in their own life. And if they don't, hopefully a fucking cool mystery that leads to a fantastical world with all kinds of incredible characters brought to life by this amazing artist.
David said I came up with these icons, but I did not. I just pointed out that they were already there. Like the 7 symbols are present in there. David was talking about bees, for instance, right? And in reading an earlier draft of the script, like the bees are present, and I'm like, well, you know about telling the bees, right? And like, because in the UK, when the queen dies, there is the royal beekeeper, and the beekeeper has to go to the hive and tell the bees, little bee, leave us not in our hour of despair, for our master has abandoned us and left. And so the bees are, in going back hundreds and hundreds of years in traditional mythology, the messengers between the living world and the dead world, right? And there's all of these things like that whether it's conscious or not, in that first thing, it's like, oh, all of these things are here, right? And that was, to me, like one of the really exciting things from a retired comic artist standpoint was getting to like see all of these things that had secondary and tertiary meanings and weight to it. I want to return to Kat for a second and ask, with all of the different art styles and all of the different crazy worlds and moments we go to, and this goes crazy places. This is like, what was your favorite? And what was the one that made you a little crazy yourself in having to conjure it?
Honestly, my favorite is my favorite is actually Chicago.
Yeah.
Just because I love doing art like that, just down and gritty and real, and you can feel the dirt, and Also, bonus points for it being in winter, and I get to just play with snow all the time because I love doing that. Any chance I get to draw anything in the winter, I'm all about it. The most challenging, I don't know. I think one of the most challenging ones was I wanted to, and I hope this worked with you. I wanted to, once we got into that world, as the story went in that world, it gets darker, and I just wanted that grit from Chicago to just kind of slowly burn into that as we got towards the end. So that I was trying to do a very slow burn, so I hope it worked. Yeah, so yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And I, having spent many years in Chicago and gotten clean in Chicago and started an acting journey in Chicago and a writing journey in Chicago, met some of the most important people in my life in Chicago, I was so obsessed with, I don't know if you've spent any time in one of those places where the crystalline, deep winter, the ice and the way the snow sets and the crunchiness of all of that. But it's one of those things where the more hyper specifically you can deep in and look, and you see the fractals of what the cold can do to a place and space, and what microscopic worlds could live within there. I wanted that existing around, and so many deeply personal stories to me, happening. I mean, I nearly died in the city of Chicago. Alex is going to nearly die in the city of Chicago, and it looks, the architecture and the stuff that Kat was able to do with, there's a very important church at the center of the story. There's a very important apartment in the story. Very important experiences around the lakefront and the view of the city, the north side and the graveyards. Oh, it's so gorgeous and it's so beautiful, and I wanted the readers, while they're going through the book, to feel like if we look close enough, you get a mic, if you get a magnifying glass out and you look at the pages of this book, what stuff lurks within the icy cracks and the icicles. That is even before we go into the world through, which, holy shit, you killed. It's so, the first time I saw the spires, I was like, it's exactly what I had imagined in my, and I'm not an artist, I would never attempt to be. So it's a really good feeling when somebody does that.
There's a lot of, I'll show you, no, I won't do it, but David's in my text chain is a whole lot of like, oh my God, dude.
Holy shit.
Dude, shit, holy, it's like, did you see, yes, I know, dude, yeah, dude.
It's true.
Dude.
It's a lot of dude.
This is my favorite word.
Going off of the ice thing, so Z2 is known for pushing the boundaries in production, because if you're going to kill a tree, you need to make it worth the tree's death,
And this book puts the whole tree back together again.
Yes.
It's so vast.
So, and Josh Bernstein is the president of the company. He and I are both retired designers that keep getting hauled out of retirement. And we wanted to do something with the cover that was radically different. And there was also the dilemma of Mr. Mack's painting was like astounding, and it's edge to edge, and it's like we didn't want to obfuscate or clutter it or draw away from it, right? And we spent, and I'm not exaggerating, we spent months on different design treatments, and then there was a book that came out in the 90s called The Negative. It has an acetate dust jacket, and there's the art that's printed on the book, and then there's art that's printed on this clear acetate. So we are doing that through. So the art that is printed on the book is David's undressed art, and then you have this icy crystalline logo that is printed on the acetate that lays over the top of it. So
It's so fucking cool.
yeah. That lovely QR code will allow you to pre-order the book. And if you do so, and you have your receipt, you can come at 1:00 tomorrow, and we have a print that you will be able to take away with you and that David will sign.
I would love to be able to sign that for you tomorrow
Yeah.
if you can come. It's a digital. Yay! Thank you for coming. It's a digital marketplace in which we live now, and all of us know and love the vitality of brick and mortar comic shops. And as you know, we're always yelling and screaming for you to support your local comic shop and your local bookstore, because this is a book that will hopefully also have a life in bookstores. My dream of it is that it would have a life in art bookstores as well, because it is like a coffee table art book that, you know, you could just have as a conversation piece and somebody open it because the art is so cool and not realize they're about to dive into a puzzle and get lost in this mystery. But the opportunity to get to interact with you and to get to thank you for participating and going on such a personal journey with me is something that I don't take lightly, and it's why this, you know, being here at San Diego was so important for me. And I wanted a chance, like tomorrow, be able to sit there and sign these prints of this beautiful imagery and one additional keepsake, hopefully, that you can have from this. But I don't know how it will work, and I don't know how it's going to facilitate itself, but whenever people are open and willing to discuss and talk about, you know, the elements of themselves, that I'm all for. I love capes and tights, and I love science fiction, and I love on the surface huck and clutter battles between superheroes and all other, you know, kinds of magic. But when there is an opportunity with the comic book medium, the graphic novel medium, the art and words medium to explore some of the more tricky stuff when it comes to life, I really love that. And I want to tell stories that hopefully entertain you and transport you, but that if you are interested or curious about wanting to explore some of that stuff, I hope that this experience will be an invitation to do so, because the most important thing through all of the stuff that I've learned in writing this book and on my own personal journey, and what I needed Alex, and you'll have to see, sadly, if she is able to actually like learn this lesson or not, because I did want this story to push the limits, but is how, when, and where do we ever find the strength, the love for ourselves within ourselves to be able to ask somebody else for help? You cannot make it through the labyrinth that is this life alone. As much as this world tries to convince us that we're alone, as much as everything that these tell us constantly as you're swiping through that you're missing this thing in your life, you don't have this thing in your life, you're alone. You're not, and I fall for it constantly, several times a day, in fact. That's why I have to keep doing the work, but we're not, and I think that was ultimately coming through. The only way out is to go through the thing, and you do not have to go through it alone.
I think that sums it up really well, because one of the appeals, and David and I talked about this at that coffee shop, where